Hello, everyone. This is episode 45 of Streets and Eats. And today on this episode, we're actually leaving the streets and stepping away from the eats. We want to talk about our favorite wildlife encounters around the world. Welcome to Streets and Eats, the travel and food podcast dedicated to taking our listeners to the sights, sounds, and flavors of fascinating places near and far, both on and off the beaten path. We're Jim and Corinne Vale, and we've been traveling internationally and domestically together for decades, visiting more than 90 countries and all 50 states in the USA. We'll share all of the local knowledge and food expertise we've gathered through years of living as expats in Asia and Europe, as well as traveling with families spanning multiple generations around the world. Join us each week for a new adventure. Okay, we've been really busy lately getting ready to travel. We've done some, of course, local stuff and road trips and things like that. But now we are getting everything together for heading international. And one of the things we had to do today in preparation for getting renewed passports was to get our enhanced driver's license. I have to tell you, we had to go to the DMV. I don't think
nobody loves going to the Department of Motor Vehicles.
Yeah, I don't think they actually call it the Department of Motor Vehicles here in Washington State, but it's basically that's what it is. It's the place where you go for your license. And it has never been a fun experience for me.
Or me.
But I have to say today, we had appointments. We walked in, didn't have to wait at all. Went right up. The woman I was working with was cheerful and chatty and competent. Got the job done. The only thing I didn't know about was the fee on the credit card. I'm like, oh man, I wish I had brought some cash.
Which I believe is a little antiquated.
Right.
But whatever. Anyway, it was a good experience. We got our enhanced IDs. Therefore, we can send off our passports to get renewed and we can go, where'd she say? We can go
to Canada, Mexico, the Bahamas, or Bermuda. Is that right?
Other parts of the Caribbean, right? Because she said Caribbean.
I don't know.
The same place you can go with a passport card, which we've never owned because we've always had a passport.
Passports, yeah. So anywhere by sea or by land, those crossings, not by air. You can't use your state license, enhanced ID or license to travel internationally.
Anywhere, even into Canada. If you fly into Canada, you have to have a passport.
So good to know, right?
So that was, which I'd learned. I didn't know that before.
So now we have that. We can still travel into Canada or Mexico or those other places while we send off our passports for renewal because our passports need to be renewed before this fall. And that could take some time, especially since a lot of people now are getting back into travel and there's going to be a lot more of a demand to get passports renewed or to get new passports. So if you are listening to this right now, I would go check your passport date real quick just to make sure and then make a plan. That's a little bit more difficult to do than getting our enhanced driver's licenses.
Well, it says that it takes 8 to 11 weeks.
Yeah, hopefully it won't be that long.
On the website.
But we're prepared for it.
That's right. All righty. So one thing that Jim and I love to do when we travel is to seek out the local wildlife. So, everybody's been to a zoo and you've seen zebras and giraffes and elephants, and it's great and we love them. But to be able to see them in their natural habitat, leading their lives as they would normally lead their lives is so, so amazing. It just takes your breath away.
Yeah.
So we search that out everywhere we go. And we were lucky enough to live in Alaska for 8 years. So what that did for us is it helped us learn how to spot animals because I do believe that's a skill. And I think we're pretty good at it. But luckily, a lot of these places, you don't really have to be that good. There's other people spotting them for you or they're just there.
So how this is going to work, we've each come up separately with what we think were our top 10 animal sightings in
wildlife.
The wild.
Okay. So then we're not talking domestic, even though we've had some amazing domestic encounters as well.
True. And we can mention those maybe if there's time at the end.
We will mention those because we've got articles about them and we want you to
talk about it.
Know all the wonderful things that you can do with domestic animals as well as with wild animals.
So we'll just go back and forth and I'll talk about my number 10 and then you can talk about your number 10. Should we decide which one is the actual number 10 or wait till the end and then we'll make a top 10 list?
I say we have a little, I guess you could call
Which
it
one wins?
debate, and then we can rank them in the end. Because we have done so many. I mean, I had a top 12 without even trying, and that is, believe it or not, leaving out things that would be on everybody's top 10 because they're just so amazing.
What do you mean top 12?
I said that was my very first try. I had 12. I had to cut.
Yeah,
2 and but on top of that, I mean,
I
that's
definitely
not
had
even
to chop some too.
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing.
Okay, my number 10 is in Alaska. I'm sure everybody knows, we were both connected with the military. I was stationed in Elmendorf in Alaska. And one of the things about Elmendorf Air Force Base in Alaska, if you have access to it, is on the back side of the base, across the runway and back behind the hangars, is this massive wilderness area that you can just go back and explore. Now, there are some areas, of course, that are off limits, but for the most part, there's trails, there's roads you can drive, 4-wheel driving. It's just full of wildlife. There's bears, there's moose, deer, all that good stuff.
Loons.
You
with
can
babies riding on their backs.
You can see beluga whales from one of the beaches. There's good salmon fishing. The salmon come up in the summertime and spawn up through one of the creeks. And so it's just chock full of salmon. That's super incredible. But what I'm going to say is my number 10 spotting was one day we were driving back there and there were 2 male moose in rut, and they were clashing their antlers or their horns together.
Antlers.
At the same time, the velvet was coming off, and
it was amazing.
It was an incredible sighting. They're snorting. It was cold, so their snorts were like steam shooting out of their nostrils.
It was straight out of a movie, a National Geographic movie. And we didn't have a camera with us.
No camera.
This is just it's just engraved indelibly into our memories, and we'll never forget it. But it was no amazing. Camera. I did not mention that at all, though.
That didn't even make your number 10.
Didn't even make my top 10.
I have a feeling not many of our sightings will match up. It's definitely not by number.
Alaska is in my top 10. But there's so many amazing things in Alaska, things that didn't make it. We're driving the Dalton Highway where we saw the caribou migration and the great snowy owl on the ground. Remember that? Mm-hmm. I've been to St. Paul.
Don't mention your numbered Alaskan item.
I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not. I mentioned the ones that didn't make the list. I've been to St. Paul and St. George Island where they have amazing seal rookeries that were cool to see. And of course, anywhere in the waters, you see whales, orcas.
Well, I've had a great whale sighting in Alaska as well while halibut fishing, where a gray whale breached completely out of the water. Massive, huge splash. It was so close. The splash almost reached the boat. And I just happened to be looking up, holding my fishing rod. Nothing else was going on around me. Just out of the blue.
I saw it. I was there.
That was incredible. But that didn't make my list.
That didn't make my list either.
All right. What is your number 10?
My number 10, I bet you didn't even remember about this.
We'll see.
My number 10 was swimming with dolphins in Kaikoura, New Zealand.
I did remember it, but I didn't put it on my list.
And I'll tell you why it made the list so high compared to some of the things that didn't make the list. So there were so many places that you could swim with dolphins around the world that are dolphins that are encaptured. They live at the place, and they're basically in a zoo kind of situation.
Right.
And yes, you can swim with them, and that's probably an amazing experience. But to me, that's not a wildlife experience because they're in a zoo. They're captive. They're captive. But this swimming with dolphins in Kaikoura, New Zealand, you get in wetsuits, you get on a boat, you go out into the middle of this cold sea, and the dusky dolphins come around you. And of course, you're not allowed to touch them, and you don't want to touch them. That's not the idea. The idea is just being in nature with these amazing mammals. And so I really I appreciated that. Now, it's again, unfortunately, it's one of those things that we didn't get photos of because we didn't have a good water camera at the time. So we don't have any pictures of it, but it's an experience and it was amazing. And they still do it.
That was a very cool experience. Like you said, you just get on this small little boat out into the middle of this bay and they dump you out the back. And
it was fun.
And then they move away, of course, because you don't want the boat near the dolphins. So you're just kind of floating around in the water with the dolphins swimming around you. That was very cool. Yeah, that didn't make my list. I enjoyed that. I did have,
We're going to have a hard time coming up together with a list.
Something very similar for my number 9 in the Fiji Islands. Oh. We went swimming with the sharks.
That was your number 9?
Yeah.
I did swimming with Fiji, but it was my number 7.
Okay. And that was a very cool experience. Again, it was not in like an aquarium location or anything like that.
It wasn't in a cage.
Take a boat out to this reef far, far out away from anything, jump out of the boat and you're in the water with reef sharks. Mm-hmm. So we're not talking like great whites or anything like that. And I think the biggest one was maybe 8 feet long.
I don't know. They seem pretty big to me.
Tail, which is pretty big.
And there was a lot of them.
But they weren't going to be eating people. They were eating little tiny fish around the reefs. That's why they're called reef sharks.
And it made your heart pump.
Yeah.
Your adrenaline was definitely going. But it was also, it was just amazing watching them swim above you, below you.
Around you. They didn't get real close. They stayed away from the people, but.
Well, you couldn't touch them again. And that's okay. I didn't want to touch them.
Right. So that was my number 9.
And that was my number 7. My number 9 was having breakfast with the elephants in the Maremi Game Reserve.
Yeah, another good one, but it didn't make my list.
Didn't make your list. Okay, so we were on a self-drive safari in Botswana, and we're in the Maremi Game Reserve, and we got up early, and we didn't really eat breakfast. We brought along some peanut butter and some crackers, and we saw this herd of elephants coming through the bush. And believe it or not, I mean, I never realized, when I think of camouflage, elephants isn't the first animal that comes to mind as being camouflaged. You can't see them. You can't see them when they're 10 feet away from you. They are camouflaged. It's amazing to me. But anyway, we did see this herd sort of making their way down this hill, and we were more at the bottom of the hill, and we just pulled over, turned the engine off, which we found out later was not a good idea, but we did it anyway. Turned the engine off, and we just let the elephants come to us. And because we were there first, they were all around us, and we weren't so quiet they didn't know we were there. They knew we were there, but we weren't invasive at all. We didn't intrude on them. We didn't make a lot of noise. We just sat and watched them.
We
ate our peanut butter crackers, and we call that having breakfast with the elephants, and it was an amazing morning.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
But it didn't even make your list because we've had so many great stuff, right? Yeah. And many to do with elephants. Although we've seen lots of wild elephants and enjoyed them, but a lot of the elephant things that we've done have been more what I would consider domestic. For example, we went to the elephant orphanage in Sri Lanka.
Yeah, that was very cool.
And even though they're elephants, they're kept in an enclosure. They're essentially captive, even though they're free to roam, and they're living a great life. And we even played. Remember that? We were playing with a little young elephant. It kept pushing us, and some
of those you can even go down and help them bathe and wash them and stuff like that.
Yeah. So we've had lots of elephant experiences, and we love elephants. But I just thought this one was super special because they were all around us, babies and mamas, and it was just fun.
In Maremi, yeah. And we had it was very serendipitous, it seemed, because we had just kind of stopped we thought we had a quiet place.
We knew they were coming down the hill.
Yeah, we weren't sure they were going to come like right around us like they did, though. So that was pretty cool. Number 8 for me, which I'm sure did not make your list, but this was in the Daintree Rainforest in Queensland, Australia.
It didn't make my list.
Where we were just...
It didn't make any of my lists.
Kind of wandering around in the car through the rainforest, and a cassowary came right across the road in front of us. And the reason it made my list is because cassowaries are endangered. It's extremely rare that you're going to see one in the wild. And here's one just strutting across right in front of us. Massive, 5 feet tall, armored skull, bright blue,
very ancient looking,
very
dinosaur scary looking.
Just an incredible viewing.
It did make my list. And in fact, Australia, I don't think anything in Australia made my top 10, even though just other things in Australia make your top 10?
No, but I came very close to adding our encounter with the little baby kangaroo that
went on a walk
with us.
Yeah. Her name was Yua.
Yua girl.
You a girl, exactly. But there was, again, in Australia, we
platypus.
We saw the platypus.
Yeah, there's some pretty incredible stuff in Australia.
Yeah. And even though we enjoyed it and we loved it, and the wallabies are cute and they're everywhere, and I don't know.
Well, I guess the reason I didn't put on my list, if you go to Australia, you're probably going to see kangaroos. So it's not like it's that
I think
incredible.
It's special. I think it's incredible.
But walking with Yua that one morning.
That was incredible.
That was pretty incredible. But you're not going to see a cassowary necessarily.
I guess you're right. I don't know.
So what was your number 8?
My number 8 was going to see the chimps in Uganda.
Yeah, that was pretty good. Uganda made my list. It's much higher up.
For chimps?
Not for chimps.
Okay. Well,
so we'll talk about that later.
Okay. The other one is up higher.
The chimps didn't make my list. That was a very incredible experience.
Yeah. Here's the problem with the chimps. And the reason it's only my number 8 didn't make your list. The chimps were amazing. But they fell short because we saw them after the other amazing thing. That's higher true. On our list. But it was amazing, and we had a great time. And you can't. I mean, they were chimps in the wild. I mean, how exciting is that? So that made my list. So then mine so far is the swimming with dolphins, the elephant breakfast, chimps, and swimming with sharks. Since we've already talked about those. So what was your number 7?
Okay, so my number 7. I made a little bit of a gaffe earlier when I talked about Alaska. I do have a number 7 Alaska item, and that is that breaching gray whale.
Oh.
So I've already mentioned it. I don't need to talk about it again. It was a super incredible thing. I'm still going to leave it at number 7.
Okay. My number 6.
What was your number 7?
I already told you my number 7. That was the first thing I told you. Swimming with sharks in Fiji. My number 6 is anything in the Galapagos. We went to the Galapagos, and it just deserves a whole. I mean, we saw boobies, and we saw marine and land iguanas, and we saw one tortoise, only one tortoise.
We went swimming with sea lions.
We went swimming with sea lions.
A stingray, the size of bigger than our boat,
larger than the boat. And one of the most cool things we saw there was the fish, the tropical fish, swimming to a piece of coral and eating off of it and then swimming off. And it was just like a scene out of one of those Disney movies.
Jacques Cousteau. Oh, yeah.
It was right out of a Disney movie. Yeah. I mean, you could hear the music playing almost.
Number 6?
That was number 6, was the Galapagos. Yeah.
Okay.
I know.
It's much higher on my list.
Oh, well.
Wow. My number 6 was Chobe National Park. And again, this is one of those experiences that just happened, and it just happened to me, actually.
But I was there. I saw it.
You were there. We were taking the river cruise and going from one spot to another, just, cruising down the river on a small boat. Passengers, maybe 10 passengers?
I think it was 12 passenger boat.
12 passengers and a driver. So we're low to the water. Like, you could hang your arm out and drag your hand through the water if you wanted to lose your arm. They tell you not to do that for good reason. And we're just going along, and I looked off to my right over to the bank to look at some animals on the bank. And just as I turned around to look, this massive male hippo came lunging up out of the water with its mouth open wide.
And it made you appreciate that they say hippos are the most dangerous animals in Africa.
Inches from the boat.
It was scary.
And from where my hand, would have had my hand if my hand had been outside the boat.
Yeah. I did not have that on my list. And in fact, I did not have any of the hippos on our list.
Did you have Chobe River on your list?
I did not have Chobe River on my list.
Wow. I love Chobe National Park.
I love Chobe too. Absolutely.
We also, on that same river.
I was going to say.
Go ahead.
As far as hippos go, we also went kayaking, or actually Mokoro in a Makoro to see that herd of hippos in the Okavango Delta.
Yeah, which didn't make my list, but that was incredible.
Yeah.
It didn't make my list only because of this hippo in the Chobe River that almost got me.
Now,
but we also saw a troop of elephants swimming across the river.
We did. No, I mean, the whole Chobe
That was
experience
really
was
incredible.
definitely way up there.
So
Go,
I didn't
go
put
to Chobe if you go
I
to
didn't
Africa.
put that on my list because I already had Chobe, and I figured, well, I could mention those elephants too while I'm at it. So that was my number 6.
Okay. Well, my number 5 was in Botswana. My number 5 was at the Kama Rhino Sanctuary. And it's a sanctuary it's an enclosure, but most of the parks now are somewhat enclosed anyway. But they're not domesticated animals. And we just parked our car at a pan, which is a water source, and we watched another parade of animals. We watched the elephants, we watched the giraffes, we watched the zebras, we watched the rhinos, we watched the vultures, we sat there for a good 4 hours, I think.
Yeah,
and
impala,
watched
ostriches,
the hyenas. Did we see lions?
No lions.
No lions. We saw every kind of animal you can imagine. Oh, all the antelope came, all kinds of stuff. It was an amazing time.
Yeah.
And it was just
number 5, really?
That was my number 5.
Okay, that's on my list. It's higher up.
That's my number 5.
It's much higher up. But yeah, it was like a scene it was like one of the finale dance numbers from Lion King.
Yeah.
You know, all the animals, they would just come in one group after another. They weren't all there at the same time. Like, you didn't have giraffes drinking with the elephants or the ostriches, but the giraffes would come in and drink and spend some time, and then they'd leave, and you'd see off in the distance the elephants coming in. Yeah, that definitely made my list.
Yeah.
That was very cool.
It was amazing.
My number 5 was also in Alaska. This is Brooks Lodge.
That was my number 1.
Oh, okay. Where you fly in on a float plane and you camp there, and you're there during the spring or early summer when the salmon are running, and all of the grizzlies from the whole area are coming in to feed on the salmon.
So we were camping, and in order to do that, you have to join a lottery system. And so we got on the lottery, and we were allotted a campground. So we knew when we were going to be there. I think it was like 4 days, July 4th through July 8th. And we spent a lot of money to do this. Mm-hmm. This was not a cheap endeavor. You have to, like Jim said, you have to get to Alaska, and then from Alaska, you've got to get to King Salmon, Alaska on a pretty good sized plane. And then from King Salmon, Alaska, you got to take a puddle jumper, the one that lands in the water, to Lake Clark. And so here I am with my little pessimistic self saying, we better see grizzlies. We're doing all this to see I'm thinking this in my head as we're flying in.
There's a lot of money to see grizzlies.
There's a lot of money to see grizzlies. We better see grizzlies. And before we landed the plane, just on the shore of the lake where we were landing, we saw 14 grizzlies. 14. It was, I can't even tell you how many grizzlies we saw altogether. We spent hours and days watching grizzlies, fishing and catching salmon amazingly, and then not catching them and keep trying and trying and trying. And we saw babies, and we saw grizzlies doing everything that they do in their life. It was pretty cool. One morning we woke up to the rangers really worried about the people and keeping people away because one of the male grizzlies had killed a baby grizzly and cached it, meaning buried it in the sand, and was then protecting it, which is a very dangerous situation. So they were, of course, surrounding the grizzly and then trying to move the carcass away from our campground so that no one would get hurt.
It was only probably 20 yards.
It wasn't far from
It was on the beach,
camp.
and the campground was just right off the beach.
Yeah.
There was also a situation where somebody had forgotten or didn't think about it and kept their toothpaste in their tent, and their tent got shredded so a bear could get the toothpaste.
So we were definitely in the wilds of it. But that was amazing. I mean, everything about that trip was amazing. Not only did we see tons of grizzlies, we didn't see tons of other wildlife there because the grizzlies, the salmon. But we did go on a day trip over to the land of 10,000 smokes, and that also was an amazing day.
Right. The whole area had been covered by a volcanic eruption. So it was like massive amounts of ash that had just covered the entire landscape. And then it has been eroding over the years. And so you get these incredible goalies, and it's all got beautiful colors. That was very cool too. Yeah, that was pretty good. That definitely was number 5 for me. That was your number 1. That's
my number 1 because that is.
We might have to do some struggling.
Because that was, we camped there.
Yeah.
It was pretty adventurous. I think that all the other times, it was us. We were self-driving most of the time and everything, but this was us. Just, I don't know. To me, it just really sticks out as one of the most amazing things.
Okay. My number 4 was in Indonesia. Komodo Island.
Oh my gosh, I don't even have
Komodo dragons.
Komodo Island on my list. How could I not have it on my list?
That was another incredible trip. The whole trip was just amazing. We flew to Flores Island out of Bali. And Flores Island, we got on our cruise ship.
It was not a cruise ship. Which was
basically a 20-foot plywood boat that happened to be covered and had a little very tiny galley on it. And for the bathroom, you stepped on the back and you sat on a kind of a toilet seat, but the waist went right into the water. And the sleeping accommodations were
right on deck.
Basically a futon spread out right on deck. But it was the most amazing trip ever. I loved every second of it.
I did too.
Getting to Komodo
Island.
Island,
not every second, because I got really sunsick when we were hiking up in
the savannah.
Yeah, but other than that, I loved every second of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and the Komodo dragons are just incredible. And outside of a zoo, that's the only place you're going to go and see them.
And they were wild, and they were scary, and your blood was pumping.
A lot of these sightings, I didn't fear for my life for whatever reason. We were in a car in Brooks Lodge. We were right there with the bears, but
we felt safe. We were on the viewing platforms.
At that point, we weren't part of their food chain. So as long as we weren't scaring them and giving them reasons to attack, they weren't going to attack.
Yes.
So I didn't really fear for my life. But in Komodo, with the dragons,
they could move, and plus it's just all they had to do is scrape you,
all
because
they have to do is scratch you and you're dead.
You don't have to even get chewed up.
Or at least you're going to lose a limb.
Yeah. Anyway, it was scary. It was fun. It was well worth our trip. And like Jim said, the whole adventure was just amazing. Well, my number four is the Bwindi gorillas of Uganda.
Okay, we're getting close now, because that was my number 3.
That was your number 3. Okay.
Yes.
So the gorillas, this is something where it's very, what's the word? Controlled.
Oh, yes.
Very controlled.
It has to be to protect the gorillas.
It has to be, because there's so much poaching in the area. In fact, where you go to see the Bwindi gorillas is really close to the Congo.
Mm-hmm.
And you can also go into the Congo to go gorilla tracking, but it's dangerous.
It's very dangerous in the Congo.
So with the gorillas, you basically have to contact the Wildlife Association, and you get to the space early in the morning. They split you into groups based on basically, I think, what type of hiking you're going to do.
Your hiking ability, for sure.
And what you want to do. We do not want to be sweating up and down
all day long with the chance of not seeing them.
Yeah. So we wanted the sure thing, see the closest group and get to have as much time. You only get to have about an hour with them anyway. But that was okay. We wanted to make sure we wanted the highest chance of getting to see them. So we went to see the Bwindi group, and that was, I would say, amazing.
Yeah, it was incredible. It made my number 3. So
yeah, there was a huge, what do you call the male? Silverback, who had one of his females there, and she had a baby, and they were just...
Yeah, we saw the whole family group doing pretty much everything that they're going to be doing throughout the day, eating, laying on the ground, and grooming. Very incredible. And we got very close to them as well.
Very close, like...
Closer than I expected.
Much closer than I expected, yeah.
And
that was amazing.
So we had to do the whole thing. We had to trek to the area where they were. It wasn't a far trek for us. Luckily, it was only an hour, maybe an hour and a half that we trekked towards them. And then we, the guides had the machetes. They're hacking into the jungle to make a trail for us. Yeah, it was pretty incredible. That was a great sighting. And that silverback was majestic.
Yeah.
Is that the word?
Good words. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so my number 3 were the Madagascar lemurs. And there's a lot of different things. And we saw tons of lemurs while we were there. But I had 2 standouts that really was why I made the list. And one was we were hiking on, I think it was like the second or third day that we were there. And we were in this forest walk. And again, I got sun sickness. I do not do well in really hot weather.
Yeah.
And so I started feeling nauseous and droopy, and the guide was taking us on out to see something. And I said, "Are you coming back on the same trail?" And he said, "Yes, I am." I said, "Well, I'm just going to sit here and wait for you then," because I was feeling sick. And of course, Jim stayed with me, and we didn't care. I mean, we were already happy with what we had done. And like I said, the heat really, really gets to me. So I basically sat down on the forest floor. And yes, there are snakes, and yes, there are all kinds of wildlife, but I didn't care. And the next thing I know, it's very quiet, very peaceful. And I look up, and there's this little lemur peeking at me from behind a trunk of a tree on the ground, approximately about maybe 6 or 7 feet away.
Mm-hmm.
And he was just so quiet, looking at me like, "Are you okay? Let me just sit here with you. Let me take care of you." And it just was such a communal,
right? Almost a human moment
where it was like, "You're in my house and I'm here to take care of you. Don't worry. Just sit down and relax." It was amazing. So that was unforgettable. We had that intimate contact with the lemur. And then the second standout is there's this place called Lemur Island. And I mean, they're kind of...
Are they technically in the wild?
Are they kind of in what is the word?
Captivity.
Are they in captivity? Kind of. They're on an island and they don't swim, so they can't really get to the other side. But there's so many of them, and people visit them every day, and they'll come up to you and they'll jump on you, and I don't know. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Madagascar didn't make my list.
It didn't make your list.
Yeah. I really loved Madagascar. We had some great wildlife viewing. There was chameleons
and the snakes
catching grasshoppers.
Yes. Which we even have on video.
Yeah.
We did get photos of that.
Yeah.
Madagascar was amazing. I can't believe it didn't make your list
all
at all.
All the lemurs were incredible. But yeah. I might give up some ground on maybe one of my Alaska sightings. I don't know.
What else?
See. Well, we've talked about the rest of mine. My number 3 was Uganda, the impenetrable forest where we did the mountain gorilla trek. So that's pretty high on my list, number 3. And what was your number 3?
Madagascar lemurs.
Okay. So my number 2 was the Kama Rhino Sanctuary. I put that one up higher than you, I guess.
Yeah.
That was just incredible. So we saw so much.
Yeah, it was incredible.
Right at that pan.
We've had lots of incredible things happen to us.
And there was also one point where we were driving one of the game trails, and we came around a corner, and we were on a 4x4 trail, and there was a game trail that crossed the road, and like 5 feet from the road coming straight towards us through the bush on this tiny little game trail was this massive rhinoceros.
Well, she had a baby. She was protecting the baby.
And that's not a good position to be in, even in your own vehicle.
Oh, the other hippo sighting we had was where the one attacked us in Uganda as well.
Also in Uganda, where it came charging up out of this mud hole. You didn't even know it was in there.
You couldn't see it at all.
Nowhere near.
We didn't know there was a hippo there.
A big body of water. Well, I guess it was near, but at least a kilometer, maybe 2 kilometers away. So it was totally unexpected. So that was very cool.
Okay, so that was your number 2. So what was your number 1?
2. My number 1 was the Galapagos.
Your number 1 was the Galapagos.
Like I said, pretty much everything, every day, there was something incredible. The
Okay,
blue-footed boobies, the bioluminescent wake behind the boat.
That's right.
Of course, the iguanas and the finch and all the bird life, seals, swimming with the sea lions, where they would come right up to your face and like blow bubbles at you and swim away real quick.
Yeah. Well, you didn't even mention one of mine,
no.
Which is my number 2.
What's your number 2?
Snow monkeys in Japan.
Ooh. Yeah.
And so we stayed. So there's a snow monkey park, Jugu Kundai Park, and you go there, and they're not encapsulated. They're wild monkeys, and there's different.
They're not in captivation.
Why do I keep saying encapsulated? They're not in captivity at all. They're different bands of monkeys that come, different family groups.
They do put out food for them, though,
and they do feed them a couple of times a day, so they know when to go, and you can get up. They come up close to you, and they're in the hot springs. And it's an amazing experience. But not far from there, 200 yards or something, is a traditional Japanese inn called a ryokan, which is not a cheap thing to do, period, anywhere in Japan. And we went to this ryokan for a couple of $100 a piece for one night. And they do feed you. And then, you have your traditional stay. So that's kind of pricey, but the location made it amazing. And they are right there where the hot springs are. So they had their own pools. And I was actually in the pools, and the monkeys were in the pools with me.
Yeah.
That's a pretty amazing experience.
2 or 3 of them came up and climbed right in with us.
Yeah, they weren't within touching, which
is
okay.
Good-sized pool.
You don't want to touch them. But at the same time, they were there, and they were warming up just like I was. And then they slept on the window panes and everything at night.
Yeah.
They were all around us. That was an amazing thing. That was my number 2. And Katmai was my number 1.
Okay.
So Alaska be my number 1. Some of the things for wildlife that we didn't mention that were amazing. Borneo, orangutans and silverleaf monkeys, and the proboscis monkeys in Lapu.
Come charging across the viewing platform in front of us. That
didn't even make my top 10. Right. And those are amazing things.
Those are incredible. I have one domestic.
Well, no, I'm not even talking about domestics yet. I'm just talking about wildlife. Here in Washington, all the different whales that you can see. In Gibraltar, the Barbary apes.
Yeah.
They're not in captivity either, but they are somewhat domesticated, I guess you could argue, but not really. Right. How about all of the penguin things that we've done in Africa, in South Africa?
Well, watching
Australia and South
whales
Africa
breaching off the coast in South Africa as well.
Yeah.
This last trip to Hawaii we had some excellent humpback whale sightings where they were breaching pretty much right in front of the boat as well. That was, and then cool.
Also just in North America, in Canada, we've seen moose and Canada geese and black bears. And like one time we were in Alaska and we saw the black bears with the babies that the mama had climbed the tree, and she left them because it was time for them to be on their own. Mm-hmm. Bighorn sheep and doll sheep. Remember the time in Denali yeah.
A mom and her 2 little kids or 2 little babies.
And just buffalo, like the buffalo in Yellowstone and Theodore
Everybody loves
Roosevelt.
a good bison.
And bison, yeah. I mean, you can't beat that. What else?
Yeah, we've had some good ones.
I mean, that's just all wild stuff that didn't even make the list.
Can we agree on a top 10?
I don't think we can agree on a top 10. Yeah, I don't know that we even need to.
Because
go to all those things.
Because our sightings, like for you, the lemur, I didn't include that because it was more of a personal moment for you. And in Chobe, the hippo coming out of the water, that was more of a personal moment for me.
Even though we were together both times.
Right.
Yeah.
So they got different meaning for us. So it would be pretty hard.
So, and then there's also some domestic encounters that have been amazing. Like, what are some of the ones that you can think of? Okay.
My number 1 that I come up with was in Turkey. And you would have very cool domestic animal viewing, sightings, whatever, encounters in Turkey all the time.
All the time.
You come down this dirt road towards a village and there's a huge flock of sheep coming up the road with a shepherd, and that's always fun.
Yeah.
But the one I'm thinking of happened in a very small village, pretty much in the middle of Turkey, in the middle of nowhere, where we just happened to be driving through.
In the Congo.
And a massive mother congal came charging
Which
out
is
of
a
an
dog.
alleyway, barking, very deep-throated bark at our little Jeep Patriot. The thing was about half the size of the car
She was.
already.
She's huge.
Like, get out of here. This is my village. And we just kept rolling through the village
And
slowly.
she bit the bumper.
And she chomped onto the bumper. You could feel the whole car shake when she did it. And after she did that, she kind of put her tail up, turned around, and went strutting off.
She was so proud of herself.
I got that guy.
That was really cool, but that wasn't, to me, the best domestic experience. There's, like you said, there was tons in Turkey. But what about the time when we were on the Iranian border in Turkey and we were up in the hills milking the sheep with the shepherds and the local ladies?
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
That was beyond way cool.
Unfortunately, in that instance, I was relegated to
cameraman.
shooting the camera.
And
you got
I got to do it. Yeah.
Get your hands
Well,
filthy.
that's because, the hands were filthy. In Iceland, the sheep and horses in Iceland were amazing.
All the sheep were incredible.
In Madagascar, I counted this as domestic, was the zebu, all their cattle.
The zebu, yeah.
Those were really cool.
Yeah.
And then all of our camel experiences I've considered to be domestic as well. And we've had amazing experiences with camels in Mongolia, UAE,
Egypt,
India, and Egypt.
Yeah.
Egypt was, I don't know, which
That
one was
of my
the
favorites.
best?
I liked Egypt the best because we did have a kid leading us through the desert on our way out to the convent. And so there was that. But other than that, it was we were on 2 camels and it was just us. And going out through the desert.
And what also was really cool about that is it was the ancient pathway.
Yeah.
We kept seeing like people with donkeys laden down with green stuff, whatever the greenery stuff was. That was really cool. The other one that was really cool though was in Mongolia, where we were out there and we were in the Gobi Desert. And we were just, there's these huge sand dunes.
Yeah.
And we were riding those are bacteria camels. Which are the ones that have the 2 humps?
Oh, don't put me on the spot.
Well, these were the 2 hump ones, which were, I think, much nicer to ride than the 1 hump
I think
camels.
so too.
Anyway, so we've had lots of cool camel experiences. And horse, also in Mongolia, we did the horse ride there and the yaks and sheep shearing, watching the people do the sheep shearing.
Milking of the yaks too. Did you ever get?
I didn't actually milk the yak.
Oh.
She showed me how to do it, and I was right there, but I didn't get to do it. Yeah, and then we did sheep shearing in the Faroe Islands. That was really, really cool.
Yeah, that was a very good one.
So we've had, and one of the coolest things I think we've ever done, and we paid for this experience, and you can too, is we were in the Lake District in England and took a sheep dog lesson.
Yeah.
Where we learned how to command the sheepdogs as we were herding sheep. That was really cool.
Sheep. Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
So we love animals and we really kind of go out of our way to find experiences where we will get to see local wildlife and we're just as thrilled with domestic or farming type animals and that kind of product.
We tend to shy away from zoos. But zoos do serve a good purpose too. But we definitely would rather see them in their natural environment.
Yes. And we certainly don't want to do anything where they're being abused or misused.
Yeah. And we've learned, as you said earlier, from living in Alaska, it was pretty much when we started learning about how to view wildlife safely, not just for us, but for the animals as well. And keeping everything in mind as you're doing it. Making sure you don't approach them too close or too quickly. If they come towards you, maintaining a safe distance.
Mm-hmm. Making sure there's no food.
And don't startle them. All these things are really important.
Yeah.
And we want to make sure that we stay safe and that we keep the animals safe.
So we didn't come up with a good list
of
the top 10.
I don't know that we could.
But what I guess the moral of the story is...
How about top 3? Can we say our top 3?
Our top 3? Well, Katmai is going to be in our top 3.
Yeah.
Botswana in general.
We could probably agree on regions or parks maybe.
Yeah. I would say...
I think has to be in the top 3.
Galapagos. Well, maybe even top 5. Uganda.
We could do a top 5.
Okay, so let's say Alaska and North America, I guess, in general, but especially those Alaskan experiences, especially Katmai.
If we had to pick a part, I would say Katmai.
Yeah. And then
could be a 5.
Madagascar, Uganda, Botswana, and Galapagos.
Yeah. Okay. So
those would be our top 5. Maybe not necessarily. It doesn't really matter what the order is.
We can't agree on an actual order. Yeah.
But those are things. And you know what? Those are things that anybody can do. If we did them, you could do them.
Yes. Do a little bit of research. We'll put links to most of these adventures on our website because I think we have articles on almost all of them. If not all of them.
But actually not on everything because, like I said, if we didn't have photos or something, we normally won't write about it if we don't have photos.
It might get mentioned in a bigger article about the area, but we'll put those links in so everybody can start planning their own wildlife adventures.
Well, we wanted to end on a really fun note. Our season 2, we are going to take a 6-week hiatus, and we will start up season 3 the beginning of August.
Yeah.
And we know that summer is an amazing time for people to get out there and enjoy all their streets and all their eats. And we'll be doing that as well. And hopefully we'll have lots to tell you. And maybe we'll even be on the road by August. Maybe not quite.
It'll be a little bit early, but it'll be close.
Pretty soon we're going to be digital nomading it. And that should be a lot of fun.
Yeah. So thanks for listening. Hopefully everybody else will have a great summer, have lots of good travels. It's a good time to queue up some of our older podcasts, especially if you happen to be going into a destination that we've talked about in the past. And enjoy. All right. Thanks for listening to this episode of Streets and Eats. If you liked what you heard, please show us some love. Hit the like button and leave us a review. Maybe even subscribe so you don't miss any future podcasts. Also, we'd love it if you joined us on our Facebook private group, Streets and Eats, where we just have an ongoing conversation about all things travel. Ciao for now.